Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the presentation of the 19th International Architecture Exhibition of La Biennale di Venezia that will open to the public on Saturday, the 10th of May 2025, and will remain open until the 26th of November 2025. I'm Cristiana Costanzo, in charge of the press office of the sectors Architecture and Visual Arts of La Biennale di Venezia. We are live on streaming from Sala delle Colonne of Giustinian, the headquarters of La Biennale di Venezia in San Marco. I welcome all our guests who are present here today. I send a greeting to all those who are listening to us in streaming on live, remotely, both in Italy and abroad. A warm welcome to the representatives of the press here in the room and those connected online. We thank you all for your work. Here at my right, I have Carlo Ratti, the artistic director of the architecture department of La Biennale di Venezia, curator of the International Architecture Exhibition of La Biennale di Venezia for 2025. He's an architect and an engineer by training. He is the director of the Sensible City Lab of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston and a founding partner of the Architecture and Innovation studio Carlo Ratti Associati. He was appointed in December 2022 by the BOA of the La Biennale di Venezia by President Cicuto in agreement with the current president, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco, as the curator of this international architecture exhibition. I invite the president of La Biennale di Venezia, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco, here on stage. The space is not where, but rather how. And it is like a function, like a way of walking, an intensification of what is more than just a sign. It is rather a meaning, a significance. In the maturing of the place, what do we find? In the breaking up of the egg, we find, first of all, the breaking of the outer part, which is the sign of perfection. In the maturing of the egg, we have the tension of a power that exists. It is the working of intelligence that proceeds everywhere, not just on the surface, but also in the void, in the endless space of data that dilates space itself. Let us try and imagine what it was for our forebears, space, and what the idea of space is today at a time of digital translation. In the flow of digital data, the very idea of space, imagining space, and intelligence is a kind of non-imagination of space. In not imagining space, we take a stance in the extension, and extension is a place full of paintings. Extension has many different meanings. In order to use the words of Massimo Cacciari, a Venetian philosopher, it is metaphysically concrete because the extension makes a volume, something taking hold of space, it subtracts the imaginative dimension, transforming it into something real, concrete. The dimension is never defined by something that is big, as numbers do not need what is being numbered to exist. Because, and here intelligence comes back, we are required to build a world inside the world. This is the reason for this day. This is my explanation for this. And I'm saying this to Carlo Ratti. We have to come to terms with space that is no longer just a fictional or imaginative reality, but something real, something for which extension is transformed into res, a built thing, a thought thing. And this is why Carlo Ratti, and I am glad and honored to welcome him here, with the right emotion, I have repeatedly told him, trying to stress with Heraclitus from Ephesus, 1 is worth 10,000 for me. Carlo Ratti, coming here today, accounts for 10,000. The future is the project and the thought of Carlo Ratti. His special vision transcends contemporary. In contemporary, everything that is here today is something of a divestment. In order to make a direct architecture involving poets as well, we have to cross the night of the world, the ability to dwell in the world. It means being able to be future for all of us. All of us, and here we have to use the Latin pronunciation of the term, all of us being gens, people, we should materialize the labor of intelligence. In a certain sense, Carlo Ratti accounts for 10,000, not for 1, because he involves us in a theoretical, but also in an approach that is full of history, of culture, in our Italian perspective. He will explain better himself. The title of his work as a curator brings us in front of the concept of open work, on which Umberto Eco worked a lot to use new words that might turn into vocabolazzi, to use the words of Umberto Eco, to compare contemporary times that is turning into future and that turns into a stock of culture, of cultural matter, intelligence, and the 10,000, the many, the gens, to use the Latin word. It is an open piece of work, but because we can bar everything to bring it back to being. We can stress, we can adopt capital letters, we can analyze the different suggestions of graphic expression to put together these two dimensions, to say something our mind brings in our thoughts. In being 10,000, all of us together, gens, we face the future with this need to reveal how space is not just where, but it is rather how. Because in the maturing of an egg, we always have the breaking of its peel. And the work of intelligence in the work of Carlo Ratti in a city like Venice confirms something that is an absolute specificity. If we have this idea of an hydropolis, a city in water, the idea of relation and discussion with an element like water, that hydropolis, that is Venice, is the perfect place to have this confrontation. If there is a construction made by ingenuity, if we have the possibility of capturing this local element to transform it into a parameter, a theoretical effort, I would say, well, this brings us through architecture to find a further development of our thoughts thanks to intelligence. We, the 10,000 making up this gens, well, we can find a journey that brings us back to natural history, to social sciences, to science as such. In this idea of hydropolis, the refuge city, the city of refuge, everything finds its place. We find res as extension. And during the reigning pontiff's visit here in Venice, his words on the city of Venice were revealed as a salute, as a greeting to a place of encounter and cultural exchange. Carlo Ratti really accounts for 10,000, a whole set of disciplines, of references, make his architecture the answer to our need to intercept the tension of power, to bring it to action. I'm really proud, and the whole of La Biennale is proud to have Carlo Ratti with us in preparing and offering this extraordinary edition of the International Architecture Exhibition that will be not only an exhibition, but rather a chapter in a new book of our future. And the answers to the questions are the dots on the fragmented thoughts that have perhaps interpreted the awareness of the digital flux, but that are still awaiting, and I'm saying this without going back to the 6th century, to the 16th century, finding a demiurge to mold this space. Space has found its extension, and extension, as I was saying, has many meanings and contains many descriptions. So I thank you all, and allow me to thank, in particular, Giorgia Pea, who chairs the Cultural Committee of the Municipality of Venice. Venice, that is the hydropolis that the history of humanity has always tried to build in the past. Thank you.
Grazie, Presidente Buttafuoco.
Thank you, President Buttafuoco. I pass now the floor to Carlo Ratti. Do you prefer to come here to... Do you prefer to speak from the table or from the podium? I prefer to stay here. Thank you, President. Thank you, Cristiana. I know that there are hundreds of people online connected to us, so I switched to English for my presentation.
Mentioned the title. The title is Intelligence. We like intelligence because intelligence put together two ways to think. Usually, you know, the title for the Biennale is both in Italian and in English. And, but we wanted to combine it with a unique title. And that's why we went to the root intelligence. And we like intelligence because exactly what the president said, that basically it has an additional apocryphal root, and that's gens or gens. So it's about an intelligence that's plural, is collective. It looks much beyond what we normally think about when we think about intelligence or intelligenza from the point of view of AI and so on. So that's why we decided to combine the two titles and say one single title for both Italian and English in this case of the exhibition. The second thing I want to say is that today everybody talks about intelligence. So we thought it was important to explore this, but most of the recent research actually looks at intelligence doesn't exist unless it is embodied somewhere, unless it has a physical component. And that's where architecture comes in. Architecture is a combination of natural, artificial, and collective intelligence. If you think about Venice, Venice is a beautiful example of this. Venice is, you know, the natural intelligence of the lagoon that keeps the city living. Venice is the artificial intelligence of what, like the mosaic, today keeps it dry. Venice is also, you know, the collective intelligence of generations over generations inhabiting this fragile crust in the lagoon. So anyway, that's why we like the Latin word that actually combines the two, the different meanings of a plural intelligence. I wanted to add something. I think this was done, was not in the previous speech that I saw by the president, but actually I was really touched by the reference to the Opera Aperta by Umberto Eco. When I was a student at Cambridge, actually the first project I did was with Umberto Eco, and the conversations we had for a very long time about Opera Aperta and how we can bring the idea of Opera Aperta into architecture are still with us today in what I hope we'll be able to do in the next 12 months. Opera Aperta is also the first book I published, was called Open Source Architecture, was really inspired by Umberto's idea of Opera Aperta. Well, now that's about the title. Now, what should we use intelligence for? I think the question is, you know, what this intelligence, this multiple intelligence, natural, artificial, and collective, what should we use it for? And when I talk to my colleagues in the United States, in Europe, elsewhere, especially colleagues studying climate, well, what I hear from them is that the situation today is not the same we had a year ago, 2 years ago. It looks from many data points that actually the climate crisis might be accelerating much beyond what people thought it was the case, again, just 1 or 2 years ago. And everybody thinks this is the defining challenge of our time. And this, it was mentioned before, Venice is clearly the defining challenge for a city such as Venice. Venice is probably the most fragile city on the planet, the one that's going to suffer tremendously by even a small increase in the level of water. So somehow what we want to do at the Biennale next year is actually look at how we can use this inclusive, multiple intelligence, intelligens, gens, you know, in the Latin, with the Latin spelling, how we can do that in order to tackle the main challenge today, the challenge of climate. Again, not like we thought about it 2, 5, or 10 years ago, but how it is emerging now as possibly something much more urgent and important to look at. Now, having said that, I wanted to share with you, you have it in the statement, we already tried to think about the different sections of the exhibition. You find them here on the second page. We thought the beginning was important to start with Venice. As I was saying, Venice actually combines all these different forms of intelligence, natural, artificial, and collective. So we'd like to look at Venice as a way to move into a broader exploration across the planet. The second thing, clear, this should start from natural intelligence. Architecture starts from natural intelligence, really should work with nature and take the intelligence of what has shaped our environment for millions of years and actually transform it in different ways. So natural intelligence will be the first one. Artificial intelligence will be the second one, but not in the way we often think about it. Artificial intelligence, if you think about it, is almost like bringing new life to the world of the artificial. Here I'm using Herbert Simon's definition of what the artificial and the natural is. And if you want the artificial, this building, cities, objects, today with sensors, with intelligence, are becoming like alive. So you start to see the beginning of a co-evolution between the natural and the artificial. And then following that, we like to explore the collective intelligence. The collective intelligence is actually the intelligence together for thousands of years has allowed us to create an architecture much before architects. Think about the MoMA exhibition from the 70s, architecture without architects. That architecture actually today can have a new relevance, again, thanks to connectivity and networks. And then the last one that you'll find it here is also about looking at, well, what if things were to get out of control in terms of climate? This is something that everybody's concerned, especially, as I said, based on the data we've been collecting over the past 12 months. And so there we look at what are some of the other options, what actually are the options outside of our planet, not as a way to get away with the planet, but a way to better understand it, and maybe find a new solution architecture can bring to the table in order to tackle the challenge. Those are the sections that we'll go through next year when we meet at the beginning of May next year when the exhibition will open. I want to tell you a few things that I think are going to be very specific to this exhibition. The first thing is that we want to bring back architecture at the center of the conversation, but architecture cannot be alone. If you want to tackle these challenges, we want to work with art, with science, with engineering, with climate science, complexity science, all together. We'd like that every project is almost like, thank you. We'd like that every project is almost like a piece of original research that we can do together in order to bring new ideas into, again, into the built environment. The second thing is that when I arrived, in the first conversations we had over a few months ago, I was told there was a problem. And the problem is actually that next year, the Italian pavilion, what was called the Italian pavilion, which is now called the Central Pavilion at Giardini, this main pavilion, is going to be closed because of refurbishment. And well, I've now spent enough time in the United States to say, well, that's not a problem, it's an opportunity. So it's an opportunity, what can we do with that? Well, we can actually think about what we would have put inside that box of the Central Pavilion. Can we actually move it into Venice? Can we use Venice as a lab? Can we actually have a lot of architects, and again, transdisciplinary teams from all over the world, work together in order to develop new things across the city? And so we think that also that would be quite exciting. Again, Venice is a synthesis of different forms of intelligence over thousands of years, actually to become a lab to provide and suggest new solutions. The interesting thing here is that since Ruskin, everybody's been coming to Venice thinking about, well, how could the world save Venice? But maybe Venice, one of the most fragile cities in the face of the emergency we face, maybe Venice can actually save or tell something to everybody else. It can be the place that actually provides ideas and solutions for a much broader constituency. So I think we know that some of these projects will be temporary, but we hope that this project will actually be real thing that could become permanent in Venice, and also to a certain extent, and also inspire others around the world. The other thing we want to do is we start having the conversation. You'll hear more about this with some key partners in this space, and it's about can we also walk the talk ourselves, and can we actually do an exhibition, for instance, where everything is 100% circular, where everything we do here is actually then reused or recycled. So can we do something where in ourselves in the exhibition we put into practice some of the things that will be discussed? Content and container become like the same thing. Another thing I wanted to mention to you is that I was very happy to be part in 2014 of Rem Koolhaas' Biennale. We've been at the Biennale in different capacities over the years. In 2014, we were one of the few people contributed to Rem Koolhaas' Biennale. And at the time, I thought he did a very interesting experiment that everybody still remembers as a very important test. And that was, we got this amazing richness of the national participations. And national participation, yes, need to be free to explore different themes, but what if you manage to coordinate them, to get those 10,000 voices become more synchronized, become like a choral voice and tackle that. Well, that's what, at the time in 2014, REM tried, and everybody still remembers in a very successful way that the voices of the National Pavilion were following a single theme. And so, well, facing with the challenges we were saying before, what could be better than actually have all the different national participation bring ideas, share ideas on this topic with all of us at the Biennale next year. So that's what we are kind of hoping that all the national participations will follow in this footstep about can they bring ideas, solutions from the different countries that can become almost like a global toolbox in order to tackle, to see how cities can actually respond to what is, might be, as we were saying, you know, kind of an unexpected turn of events in terms of climate. We are very happy, by the way, to see that just a couple of days ago, France announced their topic. We were very surprised, and we had everything ready here, but actually it's very, very close to exactly what we are discussing today. So France, for instance, is independently converge on almost the same topic we are discussing today, if you look at what was announced for the French pavilion. Well, that's most of what I wanted to say, but one final thing. And well, we said we liked intelligence because of this kind of apocryphal root of gens, we make it plural. We make something collaborative, something, you know, a multiple intelligence. And then for that, we think in this sense, and especially facing the challenge we were discussing before, it's very important that every voice counts. And we need to have a way to actually hear as many voices as possible. And so something that's very new that we're doing next year, we're starting today, but will be part of the Biennale next year, is actually we have an open space for ideas where everybody can share ideas. You will find it open later today. You can start, everybody can really start suggesting, submitting themes and ideas, and we'll use all of that. Clearly then we'll have to do the selection as part of myself as a curator and together with the team. But the idea that intelligence has to take into account every voice, and we want to have a space for that. So that space will be open. It's not going to be just a top-down selection, but yes, it's going to be top-down together with bottom-up. We wanted to listen to all of you and to everybody outside of this room. I'll finish here, but I wanted to keep it short so we have more time to talk, and I look forward to your conversation and to continue this conversation until the opening at the beginning of May next year. Thank you.
Grazie, Carlo.
Thank you, Carlo Ratti. We open now the Q&A session with the press and the journalists, their questions to the curators, to the curator.
In English or in Italian, Inglese and Italiano, we'll do a mix, so whatever you prefer.
Enrico Tantucci.
Enrico Tantucci, La Nuova Venezia. I would like to better understand, by describing the theme of your exhibition, you repeated the term solutions. Can you better explain? Are you only referring to technological solutions, projects that would change the environmental conditions? What kind of idea, what kind of projects do you want to have in your exhibition?
You shouldn't reveal anything about the exhibition, so I'll be a bit vague on this deliberately, but you'll find it here in the you'll find it here in the thing. Yes, you know, I use the word solution, but another way to look at this, and I think this is in the little text that we prepared, is the idea that we can think, I like to think about architects as almost as mutagens. Architects mutagens providing different changes into the built environment. And that's a process very similar to actually what natural evolution has shown us over millions of years. So that's kind of the meaning of what I'm saying. So how we can actually, is a kind of trial and error thing. I'm sure that many of the things, some of the things will succeed, some of them will fail, but we learn from that. It's about the process. And so this process is not about the idea of having something finished, you know, that is the solution. It's more about the idea of looking at ourselves has actually been able to try things. And those things can hopefully show us a way forward. So that's the meaning of that. I'm told not to share more. Thank you. Yes.
I am Alessandro Gnocchi, Il Giornale. I would like to ask a couple of things. First, in your opinion, this network, digital network, that works as an organism, as a natural organism, don't you think it is opening up a dystopic scenario we are not ready to face? And the second question is, don't you fear that the cost of transformation that we imagine in terms of environmental protection will be paid by the poorest social classes in our population?
Yes, of course. You know, every new thing, every new trial can open both a positive and a negative scenario, utopia and dystopia. But yet I think that's where a place such as the Biennale can play a key role. The only hope we have, you know, what are the options? You know, the option is not to avoid something, but actually to play with it and see how we can govern it. If we go back to the beautiful words of the great Buckminster Fuller in the 20th century, he said, we only have two options, to be architects of the future or victims. The only way you can be an architect of the future is if you play with the environment. I mean, that's the beginning of architecture. Architecture starts because the environment is hostile, and you try to domesticate it. And so the same, I think, can be said about all the new things you're mentioning that can have both a positive and a negative impact on our lives. I think the most important thing is actually to test it. The second time we were at the Venice Biennale was actually beautiful. It's 2004 with Ricky Burdett. Ricky Burdett did an exhibition, as you might recall. It was called Meta City. Then we had a pavilion inside the central pavilion. And actually there, for the first time, we wanted to discuss exactly what you're saying. We wanted to start the conversation about some new technologies with great potential and also great fear. And I'm very proud of that conversation because that conversation led to actually some of the follow-up, to change our perception and how we could actually, what were the things we should embrace and what are the things, I'm sure there will be many, that we should not. On the second thing, which was, sorry,
It was about the, se non temi il costo, che il costo.
Yes, sorry, absolutely sorry. The second thing about the cost, yes, you're absolutely right. And actually, one thing we've been discussing, there's something interesting next year, which is actually that the Triennale in Milan is in sync with our Biennale. So the two will open more or less at the same time. And as you might know, the Triennale has been launched that as a topic. So we're just starting a conversation to see how we can have a dialogue. And certainly your topic about who's going to basically how the cost of, and I wouldn't call it anymore a transition. Transition was the word we were using up to 1 or 2 years ago. Here, when I talk to climate scientists at MIT, at Polytechnic, all over the world, I think the mindset has changed. This is something that could be much more urgent than we thought. We have a small lab in Rio de Janeiro. A few weeks ago, the perceived temperature there was 65 degrees Celsius. In 65 degrees Celsius, each of us will collapse within a few minutes. But that was in Rio de Janeiro a few weeks ago in our lab. So what I want to say, it's not about a transition as a good-to-have thing. This is about, there's something much more urgent. And again, this is something that we all realize just quite recently. So when you look at that, clearly your topic is very important. The topic, who's going to bear the brunt? Who's going to have to, how are we going to contribute to this and distribute things in an equitable way? Well, that is really precisely the topic of the Triennale in Milan, and we hope we'll be able to do, for the first time, actually a nice dialogue between these two great events and institutions. Yes?
Franco Claudio.
Franco Claudio Grossi, Università del Nord-Est Argentina.
President Buttafuoco spoke about space and intelligence. Now the question. Artificial intelligence, digital twins, metaverse, augmented reality. There will be room for them inside the next Biennale architecture?
Well, as I said, thanks for the question. If you look at how we ordered them, the first word was natural intelligence. I think we should start from that. Artificial intelligence is something quite interesting. It has a very profound effect on our lives in a similar way as the internet over the past 30 years has dramatically changed all what we do every day, all of us in this room and probably around the planet. We are working in favelas in South America, in Rio de Janeiro, and people might not have running water, but they got connectivity. They can connect with their friends, they got smartphones. So somehow, that has changed our lives. I think what is happening today will have a very profound effect, but the order is not random. We started from natural intelligence. If I had to pick a second title for the exhibition, it will actually be natural intelligence. I think that's where we need to go back to look at architecture. Let me say something else. There's another thing that I hope the Biennale will do. If I look at our schools of architecture in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, then you see, look at different camps and people not collaborating. Because some camps look at natural intelligence, how nature can be brought back in a more substantive way in our cities. Then you got people looking at artificial intelligence, smartness, and so on, a lot of work in this. And then you got people looking at collective intelligence. We also had beautiful biennales. My friend Alejandro Aravena, focused a lot his biennale a few years ago on the collective. But actually, I would say that the important thing that maybe we can achieve next year is that we can combine and work together. Because if you look at that, those are not different camps at odds with each other. They're the same thing. They're the same thing for two reasons. Behind that, there's code. In all those cases, it's the code of life, of nature. It's the code of AI, yes, or networks. It's the code of how we come together. And behind it, we also have intelligence as a common thread. So if you're able to do it, then together, we might be able to really tackle some of the challenges we were saying before. Thank you.
Veronica Tuzzi, Corriere del Veneto.
I would like to ask a couple of things. I know you cannot reveal much about the exhibition, but what about the central pavilion moved into the city of Venice? It was not too clear. And then I would like to know, as you have mentioned different editions of the International Architecture Exhibition, what do you think of Leslie Locco's exhibition last year?
Thank you. I'm just asking how much you can tell. Okay, I said not to say too much, but anyway, let me say, so again, just do a step back because you said it wasn't very clear. So the central pavilion, the Padiglione Centrale, will be closed next year. And so the question of we lack some space, and you say, what can we do? Well, why not use Venice as a lab? So I cannot tell you the exact projects, but we're looking at a number of projects both in Giardini, at Arsenale, and outside both sites. And those projects is a way to use Venice as a lab, as small interventions. One of the things I think is very important is that if you start with something temporary, again, you go back to the mutagen role I was saying before. You try something, you see what works or doesn't work, you get feedback. And then you might make it a bit more permanent, and then even more, and so on. So what we like is this across different dimensions. And we'd like to do that for very precise problems of the city. So for something that can help improve the life of Venetians, improve Venice, make it safer, more resilient. So those different projects will follow that. It's about accessibility, will be about accessibility, about energy, about mobility, and other topics. So that is it. I wish I could tell you a bit more about some of the ones we've been considering, but I'm told I cannot. Regarding the last Biennale by Leslie, I think it was a very important Biennale. I've been in touch with Leslie quite often over the past few months, and actually she was at MIT just a few weeks ago. But I think the role of the Biennale is to look at different challenges. I think Leslie made a very important point, and a point we should all remember. I think next year, what we're thinking is about, what we're saying is that there's many different ways to look at what is the crucial issue in architecture today. And this is what led us to focus on this for next year, which doesn't say, which says, as I say, that I'm not sure how to phrase it, but what I want to say is that, I think Leslie's message is very strong. It is with us. Now, what we want to look at next year is about another very important problem we all face.
Ultima domanda, Sara D'Ascenzo.
One last question, Sara D'Ascenzo, Corriere del Veneto. Why? A last question.
More time to discuss. And I think, as I was saying, we hope that this will be, the president talked about opera aperta. Let's use this time really to have a conversation. This conversation, I hope, will capture and will also be feedback we take home in developing the Biennale. So I'd welcome more discussion, and even with the people connected online with us today. But yes, prego.
Buongiorno, senta,
The tone of your description makes us think that you really desire this architecture exhibition to have concrete impacts on reality. Up to what extent is this true? It seemed like a motivational speech for us. What do you concretely expect from this international architecture exhibition, as you seem to be extremely confident that things will change after this Biennale?
When initially we started a conversation at the end of last year about this possible role, I was certainly humbled by this, but I was thinking, what can we achieve? And it seems to me that the reason for the Biennale is if we actually can leave a concrete legacy. And I see this in different ways. You're right. One is, can we do something that might improve Venice in small ways, the way of living for Venetians, the way the cities can become more resilient in a small way? Can we actually, when I say we, is all of us, with all the invited people to the Biennale. The second thing, as I was saying, there's also concrete. It's theoretical, it's more concrete, is what I said before. Can we actually come together? I see a lot of fractures in the architectural world. It looks like it's one of those times where it happened before, a few decades ago, and so on, where actually architecture is trying to find a new direction, and can we come together to find it? And the third thing is probably, can we, I think another impact we can have is about people going into university today. There's actually almost like there's a strange thing happening when you look at people going to university today, people who are in their teens. On the one hand, a lot of them, if you listen to what is in, what is captured in the United States, in Europe, and so on, they experience climate anxiety. They are very pessimistic about what may happen. On the other hand, if you look at enrollment in architecture schools, they're going down. And so people don't see architecture as part of the problem, not as part of what could help us find a better way to transform our cities. They know that actually cities are up to 80% of emissions, so they're part of the problem, but they don't see architecture as the solution or as part of what can change. So I think maybe a big impact we can have is also if we are able to tell people who are going today, enrolling today into universities, that actually the best way to tackle that anxiety is by looking at design and architecture. And again, I mentioned before Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon was, as you all know, a great researcher, got the Nobel Prize in the past year. And so he wrote this beautiful book about the sciences of the artificial. And Simon says, design, but design is architecture, engineering, all the design in a broader sense, as we're saying. Well, design is how we can turn the present into what it ought to be, into something different. So if we're able to tell this to the next generation entering into architecture today, again, we might have had a big impact. But again, impact, yes, I think altogether we can make sure that the impact goes beyond just a beautiful event and leaves a lasting legacy in the city, in universities, for people enrolling, and more broadly in the discipline. Can we go ahead? Any additional questions? Or do we have also questions online? No.
No.
Okay.
Ci sono altre domande?
One more question.
I don't know if I'm getting a little bit out of the conversation, but you mentioned Rio de Janeiro and the working with the favela. Do you bring any of that for the Biennale?
Yes, we hope that that will be, again, somehow, I don't know if it will not be probably our work, it will be, but work like that, I think should certainly be part of this. And no better way to look at collective intelligence than actually what happens with informal settlements. When you read these statistics, people say that every month on the planet, there's a new London. It's not a new London as a city, but the equivalent of urban fabric every month is the equivalent of a new London spread through different cities. Well, what few people know is actually most of the London is informal settlements, is favelas, is shacks, and certainly that will have to be part of what we need to discuss in the Biennale. Again, I don't think it will be what we are doing particularly, but I think something related to that will have to be there. I wanted to add maybe something, and by the way, if anybody, because I think you know quite a bit about the space, and as I said, the space, the open space for ideas is also for that. So probably mostly in the collective intelligence side, I think that's where we'd love to hear from you and from many others. Thanks. Yes.
Ciao Carlo, volevo chiederti.
When you refer to a leading a suggestion for the national pavilions, what do you expect from that? What do you expect from them? Do you think they will follow your idea? We had this discussion at the time of Expo, guiding them, leaving, however, their autonomy unbreached. What do you expect from Italy, your country, from this point of view?
Yes, so you're right. There's a fine line between being totally homogeneous and also allowing people to explore different dimensions. I think that, again, the 2014 Biennale worked quite nicely. There was a high degree of variety, but with a common theme. And again, the common theme that you find here is more about, can countries bring back ideas from their territories? I think territories also, you mentioned the Expo, is also something that was explored a lot in the Expo. So could actually different local conditions provide different ideas so that here in Venice, we get this kind of beautiful kaleidoscope of stories, projects, designs from all over the world. That's what we'd love to do. And I think we were really moved by the fact that the French pavilion independently went exactly, I was surprised because if you look at the French pavilion thing, went really into the three types of intelligence. They are talking about natural, artificial, and collective. I said, maybe Christiana gave them a copy of this or something. But it's in order to tackle the climate crisis. They do exactly that. So in general, if we can actually get the national participation to embrace the theme and actually share some ideas, some designs from all over the world. I think if we're able to do it, it would be an amazing richness with the diversity you're also advocating for. Thanks.
Bene, a questo punto mi sembra non ci siano più domande.
I think we can stop. There are no more questions. We thank you all for being here. And we also thank all of those who have followed us remotely. I invite you all to a drink at the back of this room. The press office is here for the press. And have a nice day.
Volevi